Hi, it's Greg Otten here with MaritimeGardening.com. I've been away for 11 days and haven't shot any videos. If I haven't responded to your comments or anything like that, I apologize. I've just been completely off-grid. Took a little vacation with my family, went down south, got some sun, and now I'm back. And I thought I'd take you around my garden and have a look. I would say, you know, ideally, the first couple weeks of July is not a good time to leave your garden unattended. But it was a good test of this system, the heavy mulch system, the Ruth Stout method, the back to Eden method, the permaculture approach, to see, you know, how the garden sort of holds up. Not all my plants were ideally mature when I left because we had a hard frost and set some things back. But book a flight, you got to go, right? So in terms of while I was gone, there's a guy down the road I buy my eggs from. He knows a bit about gardening, so I told him to check in on the garden. I texted him the other day. He said he was here twice while I was gone. He's just had his wife just had a baby, so he wasn't here long. I guess I haven't talked to him yet in detail. I guess he probably spent about 15 minutes here. He picked some of my spinach because it's bolting, and he said my kale and those sorts of things, he sprayed them a bit because before I left I noticed some whitefly going around, the cabbage moth. They can be really damaging to things like kale in particular. But as far as I know, that's all I did. I don't think he watered the garden while I was gone. I'll confirm that today. I'm going to go buy some more eggs today. But I don't think he watered it. I think we probably got rain every 3 or 4 days while I was gone. That's really, when you got a good mulch on your garden, if you get rain once a week, or if you get a really good rain once every couple weeks, you know, you really don't need to use a hose. And if you don't get any rain at all, you need to use your hose less. Anyway, come along and let's have a look around and see what happened while I was gone, alright? Alright, so I'm outside here. I'm at the front of the garden. And this is hugelkultur beds. This is squash I got from my sponsor, SC Seeds. I can't remember the variety. It's a winter squash. It's doing really good. By contrast, here's some squash from seeds I saved from a different variety last year. Not doing quite as good. Now these were planted later to be fair. And also this bed, if you see, if you look closely. Oops, sorry. This bed is well mulched, just with grass clippings. See? Whereas this one, I forgot to mulch it while I was away. So these plants have not got the kind of moisture. I'm not sure. And there's some moisture in the soil, I can feel it, but I doubt it's optimal like the other one. So you know, sometimes you just miss things. So I'm going to have to attend to that. I got to mow the lawn today anyway, so I like to just you know, use a mulching blade on my mower and leave all the grass where it is. But today because it's a resource and it's free, I'll put the bag on for a bit of that and some of the deeper parts, and throw that stuff on here to give these guys a little helping hand. Right next to there, the potatoes, there was hardly anything, I think there was hardly anything poking through. These were just barely poking through the soil when I left, and now they're going nuts. So these really come along well. Here we have my parsnips I planted last November. It is, oh, what's the date today? It's around the middle of July. And these parsnips are doing great. I have to say that planting in November of the parsnips is the cat's meow. Works great. Herbs along the edge down there, they're doing good too. And of course this rhubarb I planted here, doing good. If you've been watching along, these are potatoes I planted, oh, I don't know, late April I think. Anyway, they're doing great and they're starting to flower, so I imagine there's some potatoes underneath there. Why don't we test that theory? Why don't we have a look? There's a flower there, so let's just dig down and see. There's a little young potato there. I think these were the, I can't remember if they're Red Chieftain or Red New Orleans. I really should mark things. Anyway, the red. This is one of my favorite kind of potatoes, these red ones. Really good for the way I like to cook potatoes. I don't make a lot of mashed potatoes. I'm lactose intolerant. I sort of just gradually became lactose intolerant over the course of my 30s. I'm now 46. So mashed potatoes just aren't as fun without the butter. So I just toss them with a bit of oil, salt, and pepper, and herbs, and like to roast them. Anyway, potato. Of course, it's a bit early to harvest them. You know, as I've shown before, you sort of wait till the plant falls down and dies to get the best yield out of your plants. And digging around in there, like I just did, it's not really good for the plants. You mess up the roots and stuff like that. I just did it to show you that when there's flowers, there's potatoes. And if you wanted to make a popular dish around the Maritimes here, hodgepodge, get something again I can't have anymore. It's like all these young vegetables, you put it in a big pot with a bunch of butter and milk, and it's really good. But unfortunately, I suppose I could make it with coconut milk or something like that, but it's just not the same. All right, so there's the potatoes. I have lots of potatoes growing in different places. All the potatoes are doing great. Got some peppers growing in the cold frame. Nothing too impressive. And 3 of the days while I was away, I was in southern Ontario, and things like peppers and tomatoes and all that stuff, they're about 2 or 3 times the size of mine right now because it's just so much hotter there. Anyway, they're doing all right. I've had the lids, you can see I unscrewed the lids, just took the lids off so that way while I was away the rain could get in. And now it's warm enough, I'll just leave them off. I'm sure I could get a more optimum effect. Like today, it's only 17 outside today. I got 2 shirts on because it's a bit cool. I'm sure these peppers would be happier if I put the lid on and amped up the heat. But then I'd have to mess around, opening, closing, venting, watering, blah, 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 blah. Peppers just don't grow well here where I am, and I'm finding I just don't have the patience to baby them the way I need. And I'm too cheap to shell out the money necessary to grow a greenhouse, or to build a greenhouse. Also, when you have a greenhouse, it's not, you know, you'd have to be, I'm sure there's a way to do it, but you'd have to be fairly inventive to get a way for it to water itself, right? Because it's you know, you'd have to have gutters, and so when it rains, the water goes in the gutter, and then it finds its way into the greenhouse. Some project for when I'm retired and have a little more time to mess around with things like that. I'm sure it can be done. It's something I'd like to do. I just, right now, I don't have the time. Over here, these were the only tomatoes that survived that insane frost we got in the middle of June, because they were only about an inch high back then. And they're doing fairly good. These are just like cheap dollar store seeds. I got some really good seeds, and from my sponsor, and everything was going great. Then we had that frost and everything was wiped out, and I didn't have time to mail order some in. I needed to get something right in the ground, so I just put some cheap old dollar store. I think they're like a beefsteak. They're planted a bit too thick right now. I need to move them, and I will. Actually, I might do that today or in the next couple days, because we're supposed to get a bit of rain. It's always good to move plants right before rain. There's not as much sun, and of course there's rain. But they look okay, so we'll see what happens with them. Blueberries. A lot of people said their blueberries were wiped out by the frost, but I mean, see if I can zoom this in a bit. I don't know how well you can see this, but mine are looking good. So I got lucky, I guess, with that one, or this particular variety. I mean, the frost that we got mid-June hit this place hard and killed a lot of things, but these seem to be okay, looking good. I can't wait to eat these. Half decent yield. I might even have enough for a pie this year. Wouldn't that be nice? Peas. These were the first peas I planted. These are the Alaska bush pea. I got home yesterday and I was pretty wiped out. I didn't make any video. I'd been up for about 40 hours with all these crazy flying and stuff like that. But anyway, I picked all of the good ones here and ate them for supper with a bunch of other things. But anyway, these are producing fairly well. These ones don't get very tall. We'll see how much higher they get. I probably built the trellis a bit too high. But we'll see. This is a bush pea, and these are just seeds I saved. And they seem to come in fast and mature fast. And it's good to get a nice early feed of peas. Also, I noticed I don't know if you can see on camera, but the asparagus I planted here seemed to be, well, that's a weed. Where's an asparagus? There's one right there. Right. see that. Where's that stick? There's a stick. There's an asparagus right behind the stick, right? You can see that right there, right? So they're still doing okay. I find it interesting because the other asparagus I have, they were all wiped out, or really not wiped out, but heavily damaged by slugs, just beset by them. I don't know if it was because we had that cold freeze and it weakened them or something, but yeah, my other asparagus were the ones I've been growing for 3 or 4 years. They're just destroyed by snails and slugs. These are strawberries that I moved in sometime in April, I believe. They seem to have bounced back and recovered well, and I think they'll give me a good yield in the fall. These are day neutral strawberries, so they produce all summer long, intermittently, as long as you don't get a really long hot spell. Right, it's producing a little bit, nothing too amazing, but these will continue to grow, and I find this variety, these are called Seascape. They give you a really good yield in around sometime in October. Really good yield, and they're very good tasting strawberry. These garlic, these had no scapes when I left. I was just 10 or 11 days ago, and now I've got my scapes. In fact, it's pretty much time to pick all of these scapes and do something with them, because they're going to get hard and woody really soon. You should really pick them after they've had just their first curl. This has had a second curl, so it's a little bit late, but nothing I can do about it. I'm here and I got to pick them. So anyway, it's still pretty good, and great for cooking and great for pickling. I'm sure there's lots of other uses too. I've heard people store them in oil and make pesto and do all kinds of inventive things with them. They're wonderful and a great source of garlic before you start harvesting your garlic. You basically get 2 yields of garlic out of your garlic. Here's a trellis I made. This garden is potatoes and peas down the middle, and I made this trellis about a week or so before I left, so what's that, about 3 weeks ago, and the peas were barely touching it. And now of course they're halfway up the thing. These are a tall pea. I hope I made this thing high enough, because they're just going to keep going. They're just barely, I've seen a couple flowers on there, but they're really not flowering yet because this pea needs to grow a bit more, right? This is a pole type pea. Here's some beans. If you saw me plant, I made a video of planting these. They're coming along pretty good. And you'll notice down the middle, the beans down the middle look a little bit different. All the peas in this bed, generally speaking, are all the beans in this bed are a bush bean. But down the middle I planted a pole bean. And I'm going to build another trellis like this one over here to get basically 2 bean yields out of this garden, right? I'll get the bush beans are always early, and they give you a whole lot, and then they stop. And the pole beans keep producing until the frost kills them. So that's a way to sort of get extend the bean season using the same space, right? And I mean, if you're somewhere hot, I would, probably not worth your while to mess around with bush beans. But if you're somewhere here where it's cold, if you put all your, if you put everything into growing pole beans and you have an early frost in September, you're really not going to get a good yield, I don't think, at least in my experience. So I like to plant both. I plant bush beans, so I'm guaranteed a lot of beans, and I freeze a lot of them, and we're eating beans, so they're coming out of our ears and other parts of our bodies. We eat a lot of beans in late July, August, but the bush beans stop. Usually they stop producing before the frost really hits, so these pole beans continue to give you the nice fresh beans. Here's another garden with potatoes and peas, and the peas are coming up the middle. I made this video right before I left. So I mean, that was less than 2 weeks ago, and the peas were barely touching the bottom of the trellis. And so you can see it's time to put another level of that chicken wire on them. They've already grown up to the top of the trellis I made. I made that and literally uploaded that video the morning. I made it the day before I left, and I uploaded it the morning we got on the plane to leave. So that's fast growth, right? That was about 11 days ago, and now they're already up to there. I think I'm going to get a lot of peas this year. these beans are doing great. I actually planted these before that insane frost that we had in the middle of June. But I had them covered in plastic, and they made it through the freeze, even though a lot of things didn't. Just my little tulip garden, and I planted a bunch of beans in there. My wife loves tulips, and this is the only place I can grow them because we have deer here. So the tulips are totally done. There's iris growing there as well. I'm not really big on the flowers, but you know, and the front yard of our house, of course, I have some ornamental plants there, but they're all perennials, so things like daylilies and stuff like that, stuff that deer don't seem to eat, and or at least I've been lucky. The animals here don't seem to eat those. I've tried hostas. I love hostas, but every kind of hosta here seems to get eaten by just about everything. I've got some neighbors that the animals don't eat their hostas, but for me, I've had no luck with them. It's just pointless to try to grow, whereas the daylilies seem to get left alone. Anyway, these beans, these weren't up, so when I left 11 days ago, there was nothing here. This was just seaweed, and I mean, all I did to plant them was just plug them in with my thumb. I didn't move it back or anything. I literally just took let's pretend this is a bean seed. I would just have it on my thumb and jam it in. Oh, and I sort of went like that. Right. That's all I did, really quick. I planted that whole bed in about less than 5 minutes and just left it. I think I might have watered it once, but other than that, I left it. Or I planted it on a day. I don't remember looking after this. I just let it happen, and it seemed to happen just fine. When you plant beans, you shouldn't water them too much. They really don't like. They need a certain amount of moisture, and then they like to be left alone. Strawberries are doing great, you know, in a strange sort of way. The frost killed a lot of the flowers on my strawberries, so really didn't get a yield in June or July. But in a way, that benefits the plants because the plant put all their energy in the foliage. I mean, there's some weeds in there, and I got a little bit of work to do. But generally speaking, they're coming in nice and thick and heavy. I'm sure I'll get a good yield out of these in the fall, because these are, I think, Albion, another variety of day neutral. I like that kind of strawberry. June bears apparently give you, if you weighed the total yield, June bears give the most strawberries. But for me, because I'm not in the strawberry, I'm not selling these things, I just like to have a steady supply of fresh strawberries. So with these, you get a good yield in July, early July, late June, and then you get intermittent strawberries all summer long. You put in your salads, and then you get a heavier yield in October. Here's the garden where I planted the Vessi seed. I think the variety, this parsnip variety is actually also called Albion, and I believe, and these have really done well. I mean, I have to admit, I sowed these in April, and these Vessi seeds Albion parsnip have outperformed these ones in general. These are my own saved seeds. In general, those Albions are a little bit bigger. Pretty close though, right? But a little bit bigger. So that's a great variety. You can see some weird plant growing up here. That's a radish. I had radishes planted in with my parsnips, and they did really well. And I'm letting a couple of them stick around because these are from seeds I saved. And the variety of radish produces these huge radishes. I've actually had them bigger than this, almost like an apple, right? This might look small, it's because I have a large hand. I'm 6'4". But this radish is, I'd say 2 inches wide, 2 inches in diameter, right? It's a good sized radish. Probably wouldn't taste very good right now because, as you can see, it's bolted, it's gone to seed. But last year I let a couple of them, the biggest ones, I let them go, and I saved the seeds. And they came in really good this year, and these are exceptionally good tasting radish. Here's some sort of like last minute parsnips that I planted. We'll see how much of a root these things grow. You know, when you plant radishes, you really need to plant them as early as possible to get, you know, they just keep getting bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger until the frost kills them. So the earlier you can get them growing into the ground, the better, if you want to get a good yield out. I really maybe shouldn't have even bothered doing a late sowing of the parsnips here. I should have probably just stuck something else here. Anyway, live and learn. So here's the part of my strawberry garden where I planted potatoes, right over here. If you look back, you can see I did a video. This part of the garden, the strawberry garden, was just getting incredibly weedy. My garden borders a forest area, and it's just full of all these different kinds of aggressive weeds, and they just move in. No matter what I do, they move in. And I'm not going to dig down and make some, wall of plastic or whatever. I got no time for that. So all I did this year was I moved these strawberries to that other garden that I showed you earlier. The ones that looked young and vigorous, I moved. And I planted a bunch of potatoes here and put about a foot of mulch on top. And so that will wipe the weeds out in a sense. When I harvest all the potatoes here, it'll essentially be weeded. And then I'll, from the other areas of my strawberry garden, right, it goes all the way along that perimeter, right, all the way along the perimeter. I'll move some nice young looking strawberries in here in September when I harvest the potatoes, and let them get established, and they'll overwinter, and the garden will be right back in the strawberry business next fall, or next spring. Here's the beet garden that was devastated by the frost mid-June, and it's come back big and strong and happy, and some of these beets are getting quite large, so I'm really happy with that. And I guess that's something to mark down in your little book of things to remember, that if your beets are hit hard by an early frost, if they're of a reasonable size, they can bounce back from that. Anyone that's been watching my videos, I thought it was all over for these, really, because I'd never had a frost that hard in the middle of June, and these beets were taken out, but they came back. Same over here, this Swiss chard. Right, this is Swiss chard right here. That was devastated by the frost and seemed to come back okay. The romaine lettuce here that I sowed in March under plastic is starting to bolt now, so I'm gonna have to sow some more or plant something else there, because once they start to bolt, they're not good anymore. You can see, look really closely here. I'll show you the sign of it. When lettuce starts to bolt, instead of being open, it starts to close. It creates almost like a football shape, right? It'll close. So normally when it's growing, it's sort of open, like a bouquet, and like a bouquet. And then once it's gonna bolt, it's gonna make a flower that's gonna come up the center. It closes like that. And when you see it starting to do that, call all your neighbors and all your friends and start giving lettuce away, because once it sends up the flower, the leaves start to get more bitter. They don't taste as good. They're still edible, they just don't taste as good. So, time to eat some serious lettuce. The parsnip that was growing last year, I left it to overwinter so I could get the seeds. Massive. Just to give you a sense of height, let's move the camera back. I'm 6'4", I'm like 2 meters high. The highest point of the plant up here, so this is almost 6 feet high. Actually, I'd say it's probably right about 6 feet high. The root for this parsnip was about 4 inches in diameter. Bigger the root, bigger the plant. So I want to save the seeds from big plants like that. And of course, this is more seeds than I could ever use, right? But anyway. Behind the parsnip, you notice how I left this parsnip here. South is that way, so this parsnip isn't really casting too much shade because the sun's over there. Or actually this time of year, I guess it would be straight overhead. Anyway, the plants seem to be doing okay. These are zucchini. They were under a dome during the heavy frost. They seem to be okay. And they're coming in nice. Here's my cucumbers. They're not as big as the zucchini, but they're looking okay. I mean, we'll see what happens. I really will not be happy if I don't get cucumbers this year. I make a lot of pickles and I eat all of them. I don't even give them away. I love fermented pickles. And I can do some videos on that. People have asked me, I've had lots of questions about doing videos on lacto-fermentation, so I'm going to do some more of those soon. I might even do one with the garlic scapes today. Anyway, it's time to start building a trellis for these cucumbers. I assume they're going to get larger. This unbelievable mess is a kale garden. All this dill came up on its own. And I let it come up because I like dill, but it's getting a bit much. A little bit much. The dill have sort of taken the place over. I got to deal with this. It's a bit, you know, I like kale. Our family eats a lot of kale, and I want to freeze a lot of kale this year. We froze our kale last year using a blanching technique, and I was really happy with the results. So I want to do even more of that this year, and this dill is getting in the way. So it's got to go. I need to plant more dill so that I've got it in time. The timing's all wrong, right? Having your dill come in early, unless you want to eat a lot of planked salmon or whatever, you got nothing to pickle with it, right? You want to plant your dill when you're planting your pickling veg. Like I should have sown dill. I mean, these were self-sown. They came up on their own, so I just let them go, but I really shouldn't have let that much go. You want to plant your dill when you're planting your squash, your cucumbers, so that you've got dill when you need the dill for the pickling, right? So I should get on that soon. There's another bed with a lot of crazy dill. Again, another kale garden. Kale and spinach. If you've been watching, this is the garden where I had all that beautiful spinach, and as you can see, it's all completely bolted. It's still edible, right? I actually ate a bunch of this last night. It's just not as good, so you sort of dress it up with a bit of garlic and spices and stuff like that instead of just eating it. You wouldn't want this in a salad. I mean, it's just a little more. Let me try a piece here. Yeah, it's just a little more. It's not as good. It's still okay, but as a cooked veg, it's great. Totally edible. I even eat the flower heads and everything. They eat the whole thing. Right, but I just do it as a cooked veg when it gets to this point, and if I haven't eaten it all. We've been here the last 11 days, this would have all got eaten. But now I'm here by myself, and I got all these bolted spinach, so that's what's on the menu. This garden here, I sowed some carrots, and they just seem to have disappeared while I was gone. I don't know if it's because they needed to be watered, or something got to them. I really don't know. And it's probably pointless to replant unless I can get a really fast growing carrot. I don't think it's worth bothering. Anyway, I planted some young beans there, and I did plant some peas along the edge just by plugging them in the ground, jamming them into that seaweed along the edge there, and they've come in beautifully. Nice big fat snap peas. I'm not a big fan of snow peas. I find they you have to pick them almost every day, or they get kind of woody and they get a string. I like snap peas. I find, even if they're big and fat, they're not woody. And they're full of water, and they're sweet. And they taste great. And that's the kind of pea I like. Sugar snap pea. Another nice new addition to my garden is these beautiful wild roses. This is the kind of rose that grows here in Nova Scotia and elsewhere. The smell is beautiful. It smells like, my garden smells like perfume right now. There's people that say, oh, you should plant bee balm and all these other different things as a pollinator in your garden. I think that's another waste of time. I got plenty of things that are flowering all the time in my garden, and I don't seem to have any issue with bees and stuff coming around. But I live in a sort of wild nature area, so I mean, my garden's surrounded with things that have flowers. There's always bees and stuff around. Not an issue for me. Maybe if you're in a city or a suburb, maybe that's a different situation. Maybe you need that. Anyway, if you don't know anything about this variety, it's just a wild variety that grows here. I'm sure it grows elsewhere in the country and in North America. It's a weird sort of rose that puts a lot of these little tiny white flowers out, and it really only blooms for a couple weeks, but they're really aromatic. They smell beautiful. It actually smells like the hand cream that my grandmother used to wear. So it kind of, she's gone now, but it's kind of like having her around. It's really nice. And that's just one plant. All of this is one plant. I trained the vine along the trellis. that variety also has, I don't know what it's called. I don't know what the variety is called. If someone does, please tell me. It also tends to have wicked thorns, so it's sort of an ideal hedge. I used to live in another house in the suburbs, and I had my entire hedge made of this stuff. No one will cut through your lawn if you have that growing around your property. It's like barbed wire. No one's coming through, and then you get this beautiful smell for a couple weeks every year. This video is a bit long. This is basically for my viewers that seem to like long. You know, as a YouTube, I watch a lot of YouTube content. I like long videos, and I get complaints every once in a while. That was too long. It should be 5 minutes. And sometimes it just takes longer to. Certain things take 5 minutes, and certain things take half an hour. This is a half an hour video, and I can only really film for half an hour because my battery only lasts about 45 minutes. Anyway, these are tomatoes. My third planting of tomatoes because the first two got wiped out by frost. And that was despite having a dome over this. Anyway, these are coming in pretty stout, pretty good. They look big and fat. This is a video I made last year. I think it was called How to Make an Awesome Garden for Nothing. This is just horse manure. I put horse manure here last fall. And look, these were planted a couple weeks ago, and they're big and strong and fat, have not been watered or babied or anything. Just plugged them in the ground pretty much. Got some potatoes and garlic growing here. Garlic have all gone to, you know, they've got the scapes. Onion bed here. These are all plants outside my garden enclosure. And these are all things that deer and rabbits and porcupines seem to leave alone. Seems like I got a couple tomatoes growing in there. I don't know if I planted those or if they're volunteers. I don't recall, but there are some tomatoes in there. And they'll get along just fine with the onions. So I'm just gonna let them do their thing. Here's some sort of pumpkin. I can't remember what it is, to tell you the truth. But the idea was to train the vine that way and just let it go along this area where I don't need to walk. Good thing about pumpkins is if you have a garden bed, you plant them near the edge of your bed, you can just train them off into the grass, right? You don't need the actual garden space for the pumpkin. You need a big enough area for the pumpkin's roots, but in terms of space, you can have it spill out into your lawn. This is more tomatoes. I can't remember what variety, but I think these are like maybe a plum, like the kind you make pasta sauce with. They're doing great. Have not been watered. And I got some different squashes on the sides here. We'll see what happens with them. They were barely poking through the ground when I left, and now they seem to be doing okay. This bed here is a hugelkultur bed, and so is this one, and so is this one. I think I have at least 3. Yeah, I can't remember about those. Those 2 up there are just manure on top of the ground, and the 1, 2, 3, these are all hugelkultur beds. Anyway, very productive, big, fat, beautiful garlic growing here. I'm happy with this. Mulch with seaweed, this one. People always ask me what I use to mulch. Every time I do a video where I do a garden tour, people say, what do you use for mulch? I use whatever I can find. Seaweed, hay, straw, grass clippings, leaves. Anything that worms like to eat that makes good compost. That's not going to attract rats or whatever. You know, that's what you want to use. Whatever you can get your hands on. There's lots of breweries here in Nova Scotia. I would love to use spent grain, but I think that would bring herbivores around because they love to eat that sort of thing. Oh, one last thing. I had a few potatoes left over, so this is the only bed I built in this spring. I just hacked that up with a pickaxe, stuck some potatoes in the ground, and put a bunch of grass clippings that one of my neighbors threw out on top. And they're just starting to poke through now. I planted just this a couple days before I left, so let's say two or 3 weeks ago I planted these, and they're coming through now. So there'll be more of a late harvest, right? You don't have to plant all your potatoes at once. If you get the kind that are mature in like 70 days as opposed to the kinds that mature in 110 days, you can plant them at different times, and they'll come in at different times, which I find is better for a lot of reasons. Maybe I can do a video on that. Look at that. Monster garter snake. You see that? Right in there? I just heard him. I was just setting up my tripod to wrap up this video, and I could hear this guy moving through the bushes while I was walking. That's a really great sign. The more garter snakes I see in my garden, the better, because they take out all those snails and slugs and stuff. I don't know if he'll let me get closer. There we go, that's a better angle. Nice. I'd say he's over 2 feet long. They get bigger than that, but that's a good one. They won't hurt you. You know, they kind of freak you out sometimes if you stick in your hand, and they will bite if they're cornered. But anyway, they're a benefit, right? They'll take out a lot of things, and they eat a lot of those. I have a lot of snails in this garden that are tiny, and they're like, I don't know what variety they're called. I call them soft shell snails because the shells are really soft. Anyway, imagine this guy can make a real feast of them. They tend to be in clusters, so hope he sticks around, has lots of babies, he or she, and makes more snakes. I'd be happy for this garden to be crawling with snakes. That would be awesome. Back to work, sir. One more little thing, I just noticed these little buggers on my parsnips. I get a lot of these tiny snails. These are the ones I mentioned earlier, what I call the soft shell snails. So these are on my parsnips. And my advice to you, if you got snails in your parsnips, is don't worry about it. They don't seem to bother them. I don't know what I have no idea what they're doing on these plants, but there's a lot of snails in this particular garden bed. And I don't know what they're doing here, but they're not damaging my parsnips. You notice there's no holes on these leaves, right? So I have no idea what they're doing there. Maybe they're just enjoying the sun. I can't see that. I don't think snails like sun. But anyway, for parsnips anyway, I'm not putting any slug bait down here because they don't bother parsnips. So just let them go about their business. Let them feed the snakes would be my advice, because they don't do anything to parsnips. For that matter, you can see this little bit of rubbish here. I imagine this is from ants doing something here, because they tend to deposit stuff like this on your plants. They don't bother parsnips either, so don't worry about ants. Just let them, see, I can see them running around down there. I don't know what they're doing, but it's not hurting my plants. Hopefully it's something good. They're not bothering the parsnips, so just let them go about their business. They're probably benefiting your soil in some way because they make tunnels in the ground, which is like tilling your soil. And you don't have to till your soil. Anyway, that's where we are right now, around the middle of July. Everything's looking good, and the garden seems to have survived my absence. And the heavy mulch system, the no-till system, the back to Eden system, the permaculture system, the Ruth Stout approach, well, they're all kind of the same thing. That I'm using here seems to work great, and you can go on vacation and relax and not worry about your garden. Everything's going great. So sorry this video is a little bit long. Some people complain that my videos are a bit long sometimes, and sometimes you just got to do a long video. I have a background as a lecturer. I'm used to speaking for about an hour and a half, and I'm totally happy to speak for an hour and a half. So for me, cutting it down to half an hour is I think that's short. So anyway, I hope you enjoyed taking a walk through my garden with me, and thank you for your viewership. I enjoy it, and until next time, get out there, get at it, have fun in your garden. Check out my podcast, maritimegardening.com. See you next time.